The Valdez scout ship Serenity's edge dropped out of hyperspace, above the charred remains of Kepler 442b, its sensors immediately registering the impossible, life signs where there should be none. Commander Vexthara's eyes narrowed as she studied the readouts. The planet below had been sterilized 3 cycles ago. Every microbe, every blade of grass, every trace of the human colony reduced to ash by the Confederation's orbital bombardment. Standard protocol for rebellious worlds. Clean, efficient, final. Sensor malfunction, asked Navigator Plex, his tentacles dancing nervously across the control interface. Run diagnostics, Vexthara ordered, though she knew their equipment was functioning perfectly. The Valdez military prided itself on precision in their technology and their warfare. For 500 years, the Galactic Confederation had maintained perfect peace through such precision. Rebellion was met with measured force. Compliance was rewarded with prosperity. The mathematics were simple, elegant, and absolute. The diagnostics confirmed what she already knew. 1 human life sign, approximately 2 kilometers from the ruins of New Geneva, the colony's former capital. Impossible, Plex whispered. The orbital strike vaporized everything. The radiation level should have what? Vexthara's voice carried the authority of someone who had personally overseen 17 planetary pacifications, should have killed them all, should have left nothing but glass and regret. She paused, studying the thermal readings, and yet there it is, 1 human, alive. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Vexthara had served the Confederation for 40 standard years, watching as humanity's brief, violent expansion was systematically curtailed. Of all the species in the galaxy, humans had proven the most problematic, too aggressive for integration, too stubborn for proper subjugation, too clever for their own good. The Confederation had tried diplomacy first, of course, then economic sanctions, then targeted military action. Each escalation had been met with increasingly desperate human resistance, until the final accord was signed 15 years ago. Humanity would be contained to their original solar system, and any human presence beyond those boundaries would be removed. Kepler 442b had been humanity's last illegal colony. Its destruction should have ended the problem permanently, sir. The communications officer, Krextel, suddenly straightened. I'm picking up something else. Audio transmission from the surface, very faint. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and through the static came something none of them had expected, the sound of human weeping. Not screams of pain or cries for help, but the deep, broken sobs of someone who had lost everything and found no reason to stop grieving. Vexthara felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she couldn't immediately identify. In 40 years of service, she had heard the sounds of defeat countless times. This was different. This was the sound of something that should have been dead but refused to die. Orders, Commander. Plex asked quietly. Standard protocol was clear. Investigate. Confirm the kill. File the report. But as Vexthara listened to those heartbroken sobs echoing through the void between worlds, she found herself remembering the intelligence briefings about human psychology, their tendency toward what the analysts called emotional irrationality, their willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract concepts like honor, love, or revenge. The crying continued, raw and unending, and Vexthara realized she was listening to something far more dangerous than screams. She was listening to someone who had nothing left to lose. Prepare a landing party, she ordered. Full combat gear. Whatever's down there, it survived an orbital bombardment. We're not taking any chances. As the Serenity's edge began its descent toward the dead world below, none of them could have imagined that they were about to awaken something that would shatter 5 centuries of galactic peace, something that had been forged in grief, tempered by loss, and sharpened by the kind of love that only humans seem capable of feeling. The crying stopped. The landing party of 6 Valdez Marines touched down in what had once been New Geneva's Central Plaza, where flowers and fountains had graced the colony's heart. Only twisted metal and fused glass remained. The air still tasted of ash and radiation, though their suits registered levels that should have been instantly fatal to any unprotected organic life. Commander Vexthara led her squad through the skeletal remains of buildings, following the fading life sign deeper into the ruins. Their plasma rifles hummed with readiness, though she couldn't shake the feeling that conventional weapons might prove inadequate for whatever they were about to face. Contact, whispered Sergeant Yithkai, pointing toward a collapsed residential complex, thermal signature stationary behind that debris wall. They approached in standard formation, weapons trained on the rubble. Vexthara gestured for her team to hold position and stepped forward. Human survivor. She called out in standard Galactic. You are in violation of Confederation territorial restrictions. Identify yourself and submit to extraction. Silence. She tried again in human English, her translator struggling with the primitive language. We know you're there. Come out slowly, and you will not be harmed. A sound emerged from behind the debris, not the crying they had heard from orbit, but something worse. Laughter, low, broken, and utterly without humor. Harmed. The voice was male, young, speaking in heavily accented English. You already did that. A figure emerged from the shadows, and every Valdris Marine took an involuntary step backward. The human was tall, perhaps in his mid-twenties, by their species reckoning, with dark skin marked by radiation burns that should have killed him days ago. His clothes were the tattered remains of a colony work uniform, and his eyes held something that made Vexthara's combat instincts scream warnings. Not madness she could understand and counter. This was something colder, more focused. I am Kairos Delacroix, he said, and the name carried weight, as if he expected them to recognize it. You killed my family, my friends, my world. He gestured at the devastation around them. 3,407,912 people. I counted them, every name, every face, every dream you turned to ash. Sergeant HFY's rifle whined as he adjusted the power setting. Commander, recommend immediate termination. Subject shows signs of severe radiation psychosis and wait. Vexthara held up a hand, studying the human more carefully. His vitals were impossible radiation levels that should have liquefied his DNA, temperature readings that suggested his body was running far too hot, and neural activity that peaked off their scanners. How are you alive? Cairo smiled, and it was an expression that belonged on corpses. Good question. I asked myself that for 3 days while I dug through the rubble looking for survivors. Found plenty of bodies, plenty of children who never grow up, plenty of parents who died trying to shield their kids from your precision strikes. He took a step forward, and the Valdris instinctively tightened their formation. Then I found the Colonial Medical Center, still partially intact, still had power. His voice dropped to a whisper. Did you know we were working on human enhancement research? Nothing military, just trying to help colonists adapt to higher radiation environments, make us more resilient. Vexthara felt understanding bloom like ice in her chest. You were test subjects. Volunteer test subjects. Kairos corrected. 17 of us underwent the preliminary treatments. The other 16 died when your bombs fell. But me? He spread his arms wide, and she could see the way his skin seemed to shimmer with an internal heat. I got to live through it all. Every scream, every plea for mercy, every child calling for parents who were already dead. The Marine beside her, Corporal Zexelin, raised his weapon. Commander, we need the Kairos moved. The human crossed the 20-meter gap between them in less than 2 seconds. His radiation-enhanced body moving with impossible speed. Zexelin got off one shot before Kairos' hand closed around his throat. The plasma bolt that should have vaporized the human simply dispersed across his skin like water. Enhanced radiation resistance, Kairos said conversationally, lifting the Valdris Marine off the ground with one hand. Enhanced cellular regeneration, enhanced physical capabilities. The sound of Zexelin's neck breaking was unnaturally loud in the ruins. Enhanced emotional processing. He dropped the body and turned to face the remaining Marines, who were now backing away and firing desperately. Their plasma bolts either deflected harmlessly off his skin or were simply absorbed, making him glow brighter with each hit. The thing about enhanced human emotion, Kairos continued, walking slowly toward them through their ineffective barrage, is that it doesn't just make you feel more love, more joy, more hope. He grabbed HFY's rifle and crushed it like paper. It makes you feel more hatred, more rage, more need for justice. Vexthara watched 3 more of her Marines die in seconds, their weapons useless, their tactical training meaningless against something that moved like liquid lightning and struck like contained nuclear fusion dot when only she remained. Kairos stopped and studied her with those terrible, knowing eyes. Tell your Confederation, he said quietly, that they made a mistake. They tried to kill all of us, but they left one alive, one who remembers every face, every name, every dream they murdered. He leaned closer, and she could feel the heat. radiating from his enhanced body. Tell them that Kairos Delacroix is coming for them, all of them, and I'm going to make sure they understand exactly what they destroyed. He stepped back, and Vexthara realized with growing horror that he was letting her go, not out of mercy, but because he wanted her to carry his message back to the galaxy that had wronged him. Run, he said simply. She ran. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council convened within 6 hours of Commander Vexthara's report. Representatives from 4 to 7 species gathering in the great crystalline chambers of Nexus Prime. The holographic display at the chamber's center showed the impossible. Surveillance footage of a single human tearing through an entire Valdra strike team. With his bare hands, Chancellor Murdoch of the hegemony species called for order. With a sonic pulse that rattled the chamber walls, this council recognizes the testimony of Commander Vexthara of the Valdra's 4th Fleet. The human survivor designated as Kairos Delacroix represents a clear and present threat to Confederation stability. Representative Quilkstar of the Ethereal Collective raised a shimmering appendage, surely one enhanced human, however dangerous, cannot threaten the combined might of 47 civilizations. We command fleets numbering in the millions, armies that span galaxies. We said the same thing about humanity 15 years ago, interrupted General Vrexinos of the Titan military caste, his massive form dwarfing the other delegates. Before they turned their asteroid mining equipment into kinetic weapons, before they started launching suicide missions with solar-powered ram ships, before they made us spend 3 years hunting down their ghost fleets that appeared from nowhere and vanished into quantum foam. The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions as species-specific translation matrices struggled to keep pace. Through the chaos, one voice cut clear: Admiral Nixandra of the Valdra's Fleet Command. The human is no longer on Kepler 442b, she announced, and the room fell silent. Our deep space monitoring stations detected a stolen transport leaving the system 12 hours ago, course and destination unknown. Chancellor Murdoch's crest flared with agitation. How does one human steal a starship? The holographic display shifted to show security footage from Depot Station Gamma 7, a refueling outpost at the edge of Confederation space. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 4 hours ago. They watched in stunned silence as Kairos Delacroix walked through the station's docking bay, past dozens of species who gave him curious glances, but no resistance. He approached a hegemony courier vessel, placed his hand on the security lock, and somehow overrode systems that should have been impossible for any non-hegemony species to access. Impossible, breathed Murdoch. Those locks require both genetic recognition and psionic resonance. No human possesses. The recording continued. As Kairos touched the lock, his body began to emit a strange, shifting glow, the same energy signature they had observed when plasma weapons proved ineffective against him. But this was different. The glow seemed to match perfectly with the lock's requirements, as if his enhanced physiology was somehow adapting in real time to mimic hegemony biological markers. Adaptive enhancement, whispered Dr. Kethriel of the Scientific Directorate. His modifications aren't just making him stronger or more resilient. They're making him compatible with our technology, our security systems, perhaps even our alarms. Suddenly shrieked through the council chamber. Emergency lighting bathed the assembly in harsh red as automated defenses activated throughout Nexus Prime. Report, Chancellor Murdoch commanded. Admiral Nixandra as hands flew across her command interface. Unknown vessel approaching Nexus Prime. Configuration matches the stolen courier ship. It's broadcasting a message. Put it through. The chamber's communication array crackled to life, and Kairos Delacroix's voice filled the space between worlds. Greetings, leaders of the Galactic Confederation, he said, his tone conversational, almost pleasant. My name is Kairos Delacroix. I represent the 3,407,912 people you murdered on Kepler 442b. I'm here to discuss terms for their memorial service. General Vrexinos snarled. Activate orbital defense platforms. Destroy that ship before. I wouldn't do that, Kairos interrupted, somehow tapping directly into their communication systems. You see, I've spent the last few days learning about your technology, your ships, your weapons, your beautiful, perfect, precisely calculated methods of maintaining galactic peace. The holographic display suddenly showed new data, detailed schematics of Confederation defense systems, classified military specifications, even the personal communication codes of council members. Information that should have been impossible for any outsider to obtain. The thing about human enhancement research, Kairos continued, is that we didn't just improve our bodies, we improved our minds, our ability to process information, to understand complex systems, to adapt. And I've been adapting very quickly to your way of doing things. Representative Quilkstar's ethereal form flickered with distress. What do you want? Justice, came the immediate reply. The kind of justice that your Confederation has never bothered to provide. You see, I've been doing some research on your galactic peace, 500 years of harmony, built on the systematic suppression of any species that dared to resist. Your authority, the Kitherian Rebellion 17 billion dead, the Nexari Uprising 9 worlds sterilized, the human problem, an entire species confined to a single solar system like animals in a cage. Displays throughout the chamber began showing historical records, classified documents detailing the Confederation's past conflicts, information that even most council members had never seen. You call it peace, Cairo said, his voice hardening. I call it tyranny backed by superior firepower. But here's the thing about superior firepower: it only works when you're the only one who has it. The stolen courier ship suddenly accelerated directly toward Nexus Prime's orbital defense grid. Weapons platforms that could vaporize entire fleets opened fire, their combined output enough to crack a moon. The ship emerged from the bombardment completely unharmed, its hull glowing with the same adaptive energy that had protected Kairos from plasma weapons. Enhanced adaptation, he explained, as if lecturing students. I learned from everything that tries to hurt me, your weapons, your defenses, your tactics. They're all just lessons now. And I'm a very quick study. General Vrexidos was screaming orders to Fleet Command while Chancellor Murdoch tried to coordinate evacuation procedures. But Admiral Nixandra was studying her tactical displays with growing horror. He's not attacking Nexus Prime, she announced. He's copying it. Every skin his ship makes is downloading our entire technological database, our ship designs, our weapons specifications, our defensive strategies, everything I need to build a proper memorial for my people. Kairos. Finished. Thank you for your cooperation, Confederation. I'll be in touch soon to discuss the details. The transmission cut off just as the stolen ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a council chamber full of the galaxy's most powerful beings, all of whom had just realized they were no longer the apex predators. They had always believed themselves to be dot in the terrible silence that followed. One thought echoed through every mind present. They had created this monster themselves, and now it was loose among the stars with technology that could rival their own. The age of Confederation supremacy was over. 3 weeks after the Nexus Prime incident, the first reports began flooding in from across Confederation space. Industrial facilities sabotaged, military supply depots raided, entire fleets finding their systems mysteriously compromised. The pattern was always the same: no direct confrontation, no massive battles, just surgical strikes that left the galaxy's most powerful alliance hemorrhaging resources and credibility. Admiral Nixandra stood before the assembled War Council in the reinforced bunkers beneath Nexus Prime, her usually immaculate uniform wrinkled from 72 hours without sleep. The holographic displays around her showed a map of the galaxy painted in failure red, indicators marking every successful attack, yellow warnings for compromised systems, and an ever-growing network of blue traces showing the movements of ships that shouldn't exist. The hegemony shipyards at Vortham Prime were hit 4 hours ago, she reported to the grim faces surrounding her. 12 new dreadnoughts were in final construction. They've been converted. Chancellor Murdoch's crest had lost its usual vibrant coloration, dulled by stress and sleepless nights. Converted? The human Kairos, he didn't destroy them. He repurposed them. Our scouts report the ships are now broadcasting human identification codes and displaying what appears to be a memorial message for the HFY colony. She paused, accessing another file. The message includes the names and faces of every person killed in our orbital bombardment. All 3,407,912 of them. General Vrexidos slammed a massive fist against the tactical table. How is one human manufacturing an entire fleet? Our intelligence suggests he's working alone, not manufacturing, interrupted Dr. Kethril, the scientific directorate's leading expert on exotic technologies. Assimilating every ship he takes, every facility he raids, becomes part of his growing network. We're not fighting a person anymore. We're fighting a technological plague that learns from everything it touches. The chambers. Communication array. Activated without warning. Kairos Delacroix's voice filling the space with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. Good morning, Council. I hope you're all well rested, because today marks an important milestone in our relationship. The main display lit up with an image that made several delegates gasp. I've just finished construction on my memorial fleet. One ship for every 1,000 souls you murdered on Kepler 442b. That's 3,000. 408 vessels, each one carrying a piece of your technology that I've improved. Admiral Nixander frantically worked her command interface, trying to trace the signal. Sir, he's broadcasting from multiple locations simultaneously. At least 50 different systems. I'm everywhere now, Kairos confirmed, as if reading. Her efforts. Confederation space is quite large, but your communications network is remarkably efficient. I found it very useful for coordinating my operations. General Vrexidos leaned forward. What do you want, human? Name your terms. Terms, Kairos laughed, and the sound carried an edge that made hardened warriors flinch. I don't want terms, General. I want you to understand what you've unleashed. You see, I've been studying your military history very carefully. 5 centuries of peacekeeping operations. Do you know what I found most interesting? The displays around the chamber began showing archived footage Confederation fleets, bombarding rebellious worlds, precision strikes that left millions dead, the systematic suppression of dozens of species who had dared to resist. Your precision, Kairos continued, your cold, calculated efficiency, the way you turn genocide into mathematics and call it justice, I found that educational. Suddenly, every screen in the bunker lit up with live feeds from across the galaxy. Confederation military bases, civilian installations, trade hubs all under simultaneous attack by ships that moved with impossible coordination and struck with devastating effectiveness. But these weren't random strikes. Each target had been chosen with surgical precision. The Hegemony Genetic Research Facility, where they had developed biological weapons used against the Kitherian rebels. The Valdres Command Center that had coordinated the destruction of Nextari colony worlds. The ethereal collective Psionic Warfare Division that had broken the minds of countless resistance fighters. I learned your methods, Kairos said as they watched their most classified installations burning across the galaxy, but I improved them. You targeted bodies and infrastructure. I target memories, guilt, the weight of accumulated sins. The feed switched to show the inside of one of the attack facilities, not destruction, but something worse. Confederation personnel sat staring at wall displays showing the faces and names of every being who had died as a result of their operations, not just numbers or statistics, but individuals, children, parents, artists, and teachers and dreamers, whose lives had been ended by Confederation precision, enhanced emotional processing. Kairos explained, I feel everything more intensely now, love, hope, joy, but also grief, rage, and the need for justice. I thought it was only fair to share that gift with the people responsible for my education. Dr. Kethro was scanning the emotional resonance patterns being broadcast to the affected facilities. He's not just showing them data. He's somehow forcing them to experience the emotional weight of their actions. The psychological trauma levels are unbearable. Kairos finished. Yes, that was the point. You wanted to teach the galaxy about the consequences of resistance. I thought I'd return the favor by teaching you about the consequences of genocide. Chancellor Murdoch found his voice. This is madness. You're destroying galactic civilization. No, Kairos replied, his tone suddenly gentle. I'm holding up a mirror. Everything I'm doing to you, you did first. The only difference is scale and efficiency. I learned from the best. After all, the attacks continued throughout the conversation, coordinated strikes that demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that surpassed anything in Confederation military doctrine. But worse than the physical damage was the psychological warfare. Every surviving Confederation officer was being forced to confront the reality of what their galactic peace had cost. Admiral Nixandra watched her fleet command structure crumble in real time as base after base reported personnel breakdowns. Commanders unable to function under the weight of accumulated guilt that Kairos had somehow made them feel all at once. This has to stop, she whispered. It will, Kairos agreed. When you've learned what I learned, when you felt what I felt, when you understand that your 500 years of peace were built on the graves of trillions of beings who only wanted the freedom to exist. The communication array went silent. leaving the War Council to contemplate a terrible new reality. They were no longer fighting a rebellion or an invasion. They were being educated by something that had learned to weaponize the truth of their own history, and the lesson was far from over. The Battle of the Hegemony Core began at 0347 Standard Galactic Time, where long-range sensors detected the impossible. An entire human fleet emerging from hyperspace. At the edge of the hegemony's most heavily defended system, 3,408 ships arranged in perfect memorial formation, each vessel broadcasting the name and image of a HFY colonist, who would never see another sunrise. Fleet Admiral Vorthik commanded the mightiest armada ever assembled in Confederation history, 12,000 ships from 37 different species, representing the combined might of civilizations that span the galaxy. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was a fortress-class vessel capable of cracking planets, surrounded by enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. All vessels, battle formation Omega-7, Vorthik ordered, his voice carrying across quantum communication channels to every ship in his fleet. Target the human vessels. Full weapons free. Show no mercy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that lit up space like a newborn star. Quantum torpedoes capable of destabilizing matter at the subatomic level streaked through the void. Gravitational pulse weapons, designed to crush entire battle groups, activated in perfect synchronization. The human fleet vanished in a cataclysm of pure energy for exactly 3.7 seconds. Fleet Admiral Vorthik allowed himself to believe that Confederation superiority had once again proven decisive. Then his tactical officer screamed, "Sir, enemy contacts emerging from the bombardment zone." They're there unchanged. The human ships materialized from the dissipating energy storm like ghosts becoming flesh, their hulls glowing with absorbed power. But they were no longer the same vessels that had entered the battle. Each one had been transformed, enhanced, evolved by the very weapons that should have destroyed them. Kairos Delacroix's voice echoed across every Confederation communication channel simultaneously. "Thank you for the weapons test, Admiral. Your technology has taught me so much about the art of war." The human fleet moved. What followed defied every principle of space combat that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. The human ships didn't maintain formation or follow predictable attack patterns. Instead, they flowed through space like living things, adapting their tactics in real time as they learned from each exchange of fire. The CCS Retribution, a valvulus heavy cruiser with enough armor to withstand a direct stellar collision, found itself surrounded by 3 human vessels that moved in perfect coordination. Their weapons, originally Confederation technology, but somehow improved beyond recognition, didn't just pierce the cruiser's shields. They learned from each impact, adjusting frequency and intensity until the shields collapsed entirely. Captain Nextler watched in horror as his ship's hull began to dissolve under weapons fire that seemed to adapt to their armor's composition in real time. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered. But the evacuation pods were torn apart by human fighters that anticipated every escape route. The Retribution died with all hands, its death broadcast across the fleet as a warning of what adaptation could accomplish. Admiral Vorthik tried to coordinate a response, but the human fleet was learning faster than his commanders could adapt. Every tactic they employed was countered within minutes. Every weapon they brought to bear was absorbed, analyzed, and turned back against them with devastating improvements. "Sir, we've lost the Hegemony 3rd Squadron," reported his tactical officer. "The human ships are using some kind of memory metal. Their hulls are reshaping themselves to deflect our weapons more effectively through the viewports of the Eternal Dominion." Vorthik could see the battle raging across 3 dimensions of space. The human vessels moved like predators, coordinating attacks that displayed an understanding of Confederation tactics that surpassed their own strategic computers. The HSV Sarah's dream, named for a 7-year-old girl who had died clutching her favorite toy during the HFY bombardment, carved through the ethereal collective psionic warfare division like a blade through mist. Its weapons seemed to target not just physical structures, but the consciousness of enemy crews, broadcasting the child's final moments to every mind it touched. "They're not just fighting us," whispered Commander Yixtel from the communications station. "They're making us witness what we did. Every ship that dies is being shown the faces of the colonists we killed." The Titan military cast fortress ships, Vessels designed to serve as mobile command centers for planetary sieges found themselves outmaneuvered by human craft that seemed to predict their movements before they made them. The Titan's resolve was caught between for human vessels that attacked in perfect synchronization, their combined firepower creating resonance cascades that turned the fortress ship's own weapons against its hull. General Krexmer, commanding the fortress ship, felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of military service: fear, not of death, but of the intelligence behind the attack. The human ships weren't just winning, they were demonstrating a level of tactical sophistication that rendered everything he knew about warfare obsolete. Fleet Admiral, he transmitted to Vorthok with his dying breath, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They're fighting like they know us better than we know ourselves. The Titan's resolve exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations, taking 3,000 Titan warriors with it. But the Confederation fleet was not defenseless. Admiral Vorthok had commanded campaigns across 17 sectors, and he recognized the rhythm of battle even when facing the impossible. He began coordinating mass formations that could concentrate firepower beyond what individual human ships could adapt to. All remaining vessels form up on the Eternal Dominion, he ordered. Concentrated bombardment, pattern Omega-9. If they can adapt to our weapons individually, let's see how they handle everything at once. 7,000 Confederation ships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the flagship, their combined weapons targeting a single point in space where the human fleet's formation showed signs of coordination breakdown. The resulting bombardment released enough energy to ignite gas giants. Space itself seemed to scream as reality bent under the assault. For a moment, even the human ship seemed to falter under the overwhelming display of coordinated destruction. Then Kairos Delacroix laughed. Pattern Omega-9, his voice carried across the fleet communication channels. I remember that from the tactical manual I downloaded from your systems 3 weeks ago. Shall I show you the counter pattern humans developed during our last war? The human ships suddenly moved in perfect unison, their formation shifting into something that looked like a flower blooming in reverse. Instead of presenting targets for the concentrated bombardment, they created a geometric pattern that redirected the entire energy output back at the Confederation fleet with mathematical precision. Admiral Vorthok watched 500 of his own ships die in an instant, destroyed by their own weapons turned against them through calculations that seemed to treat the laws of physics as mere suggestions. Impossible, he breathed. Inevitable, Kairos corrected. You taught the galaxy that peace comes through superior firepower. Today, you learn what happens when someone develops truly superior firepower. Every weapon you've ever used, every tactic you've ever employed, every strategy you've ever developed, I've improved them all. The battle raged for another 4 hours, but the outcome had been decided the moment the human fleet emerged from that first devastating bombardment unchanged. By the time the surviving Confederation vessels began their retreat, Vorthok's mighty armada had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing across hyperspace. As the Eternal Dominion limped away from the battlefield, its hull scarred by weapons that had learned to wound metal itself, Admiral Vorthok stared at the tactical displays showing the carnage. 11,743 Confederation vessels destroyed. The human fleet, 3,408 ships, all intact, all somehow stronger than when the battle began. Sir, his communications officer called out weakly. The human is transmitting a message. Shipwide broadcast. Put it through. Kairos Delacroix's voice filled the bridge, calm and satisfied. Thank you for the lesson, Admiral. You've helped me understand something important about galactic warfare. It's not about who has the most ships or the biggest guns. It's about who's willing to learn from their mistakes. A pause. You should probably prepare your remaining fleets. This was just the first movement in a much longer symphony. The transmission ended, leaving the survivors to contemplate a new and terrible truth. They had just witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a military defeat, but the emergence of a force that made their 5 centuries of technological superiority irrelevant. The human was no longer fighting their war. He was teaching them how outclassed they had always been. The Siege of Nexus Prime began without fanfare, no dramatic declarations, no ultimatums, just the quiet arrival of 3,408 human ships taking position around the capital of galactic civilization. They arranged themselves in a perfect memorial formation, each vessel broadcasting holographic displays of the faces they represented. turning the space around the most powerful world in the galaxy into a vast cemetery of light. Chancellor Murdoch stood in the emergency command center buried 5 kilometers beneath the planet's surface, surrounded by the remnants of a confederation that had ruled the galaxy for 500 years. Representatives from 37 species huddled around tactical displays that showed the impossible, their ultimate stronghold surrounded by a force they could neither defeat nor understand. Defensive status report, he commanded. Though his voice lacked its usual authority, Admiral Nixandra looked up from her command interface. Her face gone from weeks of sleepless terror. Orbital defense platforms are fully operational. Planetary shields at maximum strength are ground-based. Weapon systems have been upgraded with every countermeasure our scientists could devise. She paused. It won't matter. The holographic displays showed the results of 3 weeks of preparation. Nexus Prime had been transformed into the most heavily defended world in galactic history. Weapons that could shatter moons pointed skyward, shields capable of deflecting. Stellar radiation enveloped the planet. Emergency evacuation protocols had moved billions of civilians to underground shelters that could theoretically survive direct nuclear bombardment. None of it would be enough, and everyone in the command center knew it. "Sir," reported Dr. Kethrell from the science station, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the human fleet. They're not powering weapons, they're generating some kind of resonance field." The main display shifted to show the space round Nexus Prime, where the human ships had begun to glow with an ethereal light that seemed to pulse in perfect synchronization. As the light grew brighter, the memorial holograms of the Kepler-4 colonists became more vivid, more real, until the vacuum of space itself seemed filled with the faces of the dead. Kairos Delacroix's voice echoed through the command center, transmitted on frequencies that bypassed their communication systems entirely and seemed to speak directly to their minds. "People of the Galactic Confederation," he began, his words carrying a weight that made even the bravest delegates flinch. "For 500 years, you have maintained what you call peace. Today, I offer you the opportunity to understand what that peace has cost." The resonance field suddenly expanded, washing over Nexus Prime shields like a tide of pure consciousness. The planetary defenses held, but something else penetrated a presence that touched every mind on the planet simultaneously. Suddenly, every being on Nexus Prime could see them. 3,407,912 faces, each one accompanied by their story, their dreams, their final moments as orbital bombardment turned their world to ash. But this was a mere observation, it was experience. Every person on the planet felt the terror, the pain, the desperate love of parents trying to shield their children from weapons that fell like judgment. From the sky, Chancellor Murdoch collapsed to his knees as the memories of a Kepler-4 school teacher named Elena Vasquez flooded his mind. He felt her determination to keep her students calm even as the bombs fell. He experienced her final act of covering 6-year-old Marcus Chen with her own body, whispering lies about rescue coming, about everything being okay. While she felt her flesh burning away from radiation exposure, around the command center, hardened military officers and seasoned diplomats wept openly as they were forced to confront the individual cost of their precision strikes. These weren't numbers on casualty reports, they were people. Complex, beautiful, irreplaceable people whose only crime had been wanting to live free from Confederation control. General Vrexidos, the massive Titan warrior who had overseen 17 planetary pacifications, found himself experiencing the final moments of Dr. James Okafor, a colonial medical researcher who had spent his last hours trying to treat radiation poisoning in children whose bodies had been destroyed by weapons the general had personally authorized. "Make it stop," Vrexidos begged, but the memories continued. He felt Dr. Okafor's anguish at watching child after child die despite his efforts. He experienced the man's final prayer not for his own salvation, but for forgiveness for all the children he couldn't save. "This is what you did," Kairos said, his voice carrying across the planet's surface. "This is what your peace has always cost. But you never had to see it, never had to feel it, never had to carry the weight of 3 million individual dreams, crushed beneath the machinery of galactic order." Admiral Nixandra tried to activate the planet's offensive systems, but her hands shook as she experienced the memories of Captain Sarah Martinez, a colonial defense officer who had died trying to evacuate civilian shelters that were already compromised by radiation leaks. The Admiral felt Martinez's desperation as she realized that their evacuation protocols Nixandra had helped design were completely inadequate for the scale of destruction being unleashed. Activate the memorial batteries, Murdoch gasped, fighting through the emotional storm in his mind. All weapons, target the human fleet. But as the defensive systems powered up, something unprecedented happened. The weapon operators, overwhelmed by the memories they were experiencing, began to refuse orders. Valdra's gunners, who felt the final moments of Maria Santos, a young mother who had died shielding her infant daughter. Hegemony tactical officers experiencing the memories of Dr. David Kim, a research scientist whose last act was trying to preserve samples of Kepler-4-B's unique ecosystem for future generations. I can't, whispered weapons operator Quickstall, tears streaming down his ethereal form. I can't kill him. He's just mourning. He's just trying to make us understand what we took from him. The command center's communication ray activated on its own, Kairos's image appearing before them. But this wasn't the radiation-scarred survivor they had seen before. This was something that had transcended physical form of being of pure grief and purpose, surrounded by the ghostly forms of every person who had died on Kepler-4-2b. You want to kill me, he said gently. I understand. I represent the failure of everything you've built. But here's what you don't understand yet. I'm not here to destroy your civilization. Chancellor Murdoch looked up from the floor, his face wet with tears for people he had never met but now knew more intimately than his own family. Then what do you want? I want you to remember, Kairos replied. Every time you consider another precision strike, every time you debate the necessity of acceptable losses, every time you decide that peace is worth the price of other people's lives, I want you to remember their faces, their names, their dreams. The resonance field began to fade, but the memories remained. Every person on Nexus Prime had been fundamentally changed, forced to confront the individual cost of their collective actions. They would never again be able to think of casualties as mere numbers. This is my gift to the galaxy, Kairos continued. True accountability, the weapons you used against my people, I could turn against you. I could sterilize every world that participated in their genocide. But that would just make me another tyrant with superior firepower. He paused, and for a moment, his expression softened with something that might have been forgiveness. Instead, I choose to trust that knowing the truth will change you. That feeling what you've done will make you better than what you were. The human fleet began to withdraw, but not before leaving one final gift: detailed technical specifications for the enhanced resonance technology that had forced the shared memory experience. The files appeared simultaneously on every computer system in Confederation space, accompanied by a simple message: use this wisely. The next time someone tries to justify genocide with mathematics, make sure they understand exactly what those numbers represent. Make sure they feel it the way I felt it, the way my people felt it as they died. As the human ships vanished into hyperspace, Chancellor Murdoch remained on the floor of the command center, overwhelmed by the realization that they had just experienced something unprecedented in galactic history: mercy from someone who had every right to seek revenge, but mercy with the condition that they never forget the cost of their peace. The Confederation had not been conquered. It had been educated, and that education would prove far more lasting than any military defeat. 6 months after the siege of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Lyra Blackthorne of the recently formed Human Stellar Republic stood before the Galactic Confederation Council in the same chamber where her people had once been condemned to extinction. The atmosphere was different now, subdued, contemplative, marked by the kind of careful respect that comes from understanding exactly how much power the other party chooses not to use. The council chamber itself had been transformed. Where once holographic displays had shown tactical readouts and territorial maps, they now featured a permanent memorial: the faces of every person killed in the Kepler-4-B bombardment, rotating slowly through the space above the delegates' heads. 3,407,912 reminders of the cost of their former peace. Chancellor Murdoch's once vibrant crest now permanently dulled by the weight of witness memories called the session to order with a subdued sonic pulse. This council recognizes Ambassador Blackthorne of the Human Stellar Republic, here to address the formal end of hostilities and the establishment of new galactic accords. Lyra stepped forward, her appearance deliberately unremarkable, a middle-aged woman in simple diplomatic attire, who could have been anyone's mother or sister. But every delegate in the chamber knew that behind her stood something unprecedented. A single human whose grief had reshaped the political landscape of the galaxy. "Thank you, Chancellor," she began, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had learned diplomacy. "Through necessity rather than training, I come before you today not as a conqueror, but as a witness to the possibility of change. 6 months ago, many of you experienced something that my people call bearing witness, the act of truly seeing the consequences of our actions, not as abstractions, but as lived reality." She gestured to the memorial faces rotating above them. Kairos Delacroix could have used his enhanced abilities to wage a war of extermination. The technology he developed in his grief was more than sufficient to reduce every Confederation world to ash. Instead, he chose a different path, one that honored the memory of our dead, while offering your civilizations a chance at genuine peace. Admiral Nixandra, her uniform now bearing new insignia, marking her as head of the Confederation's reformed military ethics division, leaned forward. "The changes have been significant. Our armed forces have been restructured according to protocols that require emotional impact assessments for all military actions. We can no longer authorize strikes without fully understanding their human cost. The same is true for our diplomatic corps," added Representative Quilkstar, whose ethereal form flickered with the residual emotional resonance that all the delegates now carried. "Every trade agreement, every territorial negotiation, every policy decision must now account for the individual lives affected. The resonance technology that Kairos developed has been integrated into our decision-making processes." Lara nodded approvingly. "The human Stellar Republic has been monitoring these changes, and we're encouraged by what we've observed. 17 conflicts that would have resulted in military intervention under the old system have instead been resolved through enhanced diplomatic engagement. 3 colonial rebellions have been addressed through negotiated autonomy rather than orbital bombardment. The Catherian survivors have been offered reparations and resettlement assistance. For the first time into centuries." She paused, looking directly at Chancellor Murdoch. "But we also understand that institutional change is fragile, grief fades, memory can be selective. The human Stellar Republic will be taking steps to ensure that the lessons learned from Kairos's actions remain permanently integrated into galactic civilization." The main display shifted to show new star charts, not territorial boundaries, but something far more significant. Points of light marked the locations of what the humans called memorial stations, installations, that would serve as permanent repositories of the enhanced resonance technology, ensuring that future generations could never forget the true cost of interstellar conflict. "These stations will be operated jointly by all species in the galaxy," Lara explained. "They will serve as libraries of memory, holding not just the experiences of the Kepler-4 to-be colonists, but the stories of every victim of every conflict in our shared history. The Catherian children who died of engineered plagues, the Nexari artists whose works were destroyed in the cultural purges, the Valdres miners who were sealed in their tunnels during the labor uprisings. Dr. Kethrel, now serving as the chief architect of the Memorial Station project, stood to address the chamber. The technology is self-sustaining and impossible to destroy through conventional means. Each station will automatically share its memories with every other station in the network. Any attempt to suppress or destroy these records will result in their immediate broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy." General Vrexidos, whose massive form seemed somehow diminished by the weight of the memories he now carried, asked the question that haunted them all. "And Kairos Delacroix? What becomes of the being who created all of this?" Lara's expression softened with something that might have been sadness. Kairos chose to undergo one final transformation. The enhanced technology that allowed him to survive the bombing and develop his abilities was always intended to be temporary, a bridge between his human physiology and something greater. He has integrated himself into the Memorial Station network, becoming its guardian and conscience. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. The man who had single-handedly reshaped galactic civilization had chosen to sacrifice his individual existence to ensure that the lessons of his grief would outlive any political structure. "He can still communicate," Lara continued, "but only through the stations, and only when the galaxy faces choices that risk repeating the mistakes of the past. In a sense, he has become the conscience of galactic civilization, a permanent reminder that every decision carries the weight of individual lives." Chancellor Murdoch rose slowly, his movements bearing the careful dignity of someone who has learned to live with the weight of witnessed suffering. The Galactic Confederation formally recognizes the human Stellar Republic as an equal partner in galactic governance. We pledge to honor the memory of the Kepler-4 for to be colonists, and to ensure that their sacrifice leads to a truly peaceful galaxy, one built on understanding rather than fear. As the council session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, the memorial faces continued their slow rotation above the empty seats. Among them, occasionally visible to those who looked carefully, was the face of Kairos Delacroix himself, no longer the radiation-scarred survivor or the enhanced being of grief and purpose, but the young man he had been before the bombing, a colonial engineer who had loved his work, his community, and his world. His sacrifice had given the galaxy something unprecedented, the ability to feel the true cost of its choices. The technology he had developed ensured that no future leader could authorize violence without experiencing the individual terror and loss that such decisions created. War had not been eliminated that was beyond even enhanced human ingenuity, but it had been forever changed by the requirement that those who wage it must first understand exactly what they are destroying. In the years that followed, historians would mark the Kepler-4 to be memorial siege as the moment when galactic civilization truly began, not with the establishment of the Confederation's forced peace, but with the recognition that genuine peace required understanding the value of every life that might be lost in its preservation. And somewhere in the quantum substrates of the memorial station network, Kairos Delacroix continued his eternal vigil, ensuring that the galaxy would never again mistake the absence of resistance for the presence of peace. The 3,407,912 faces of the Kepler-4 to be colonists would be remembered forever, not as casualties of war, but as the teachers who had shown an entire galaxy how to grieve, and through grief, how to become better than what they had been. In the end, humanity's greatest victory had not been achieved through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the simple, terrible act of making the galaxy feel what it had done, and that feeling would echo through the stars for all the ages to come.